from Cede territory to take it back. That's the stunning shift we just witnessed in Donald Trump's approach to Ukraine. For months, the former president signaled that compromise, even at the cost of Ukraine's land, might be the only path to peace. But at the United Nations in New York, Trump delivered a very different message. Ukraine, with NATO's support, can win back all the territory it has lost to Russia. This sudden pivot has left allies, adversaries, and analysts scrambling to interpret what it really means and whether it signals a new American commitment or just another Trump tactic. To understand the weight of this shift, we need to revisit the last year of Trump's rhetoric on the war. Since returning to the global stage, Trump has consistently positioned himself as the man who can end the war in 24 hours. His approach often implied that Ukraine would need to make concessions, essentially cede territory that Russia currently occupies. Whether in off-the-cuff remarks or leaked private conversations, Trump's line was clear. Peace could only come if Kyiv gave up land. This wasn't just Trump. Some US officials and foreign policy commentators echoed this sentiment, arguing that territorial compromise was inevitable. In August 2025, after his high-profile meeting with Vladimir Putin in Anchorage, reports suggested Trump leaned toward a settlement that would recognize Russian control over parts of eastern Ukraine in exchange for a ceasefire. That message was reinforced when European allies left Washington days later with no concrete commitments. The atmosphere was one of cautious resignation. Trump might prioritize ending the conflict quickly, even if it meant legitimizing Russian gains. That's why Trump's sudden declaration at the UN General Assembly that Ukraine could in fact win back all lost territory struck like a bolt of lightning. So what exactly did Trump say? On September 23, 2025, speaking after a meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, Trump declared, "With time, patience, and the financial support of Europe, the restoration of Ukraine's original borders is very much an option." In other words, not only should Ukraine fight on, but reclaiming every inch of territory seized by Russia, including Crimea, annexed in 2014, was now, in his view, achievable. This was a 180-degree turn from his Anchorage summit stance, where the message leaned toward peace through compromise. The setting was important too. The UN General Assembly is a stage where leaders craft messages not just to allies, but to the entire world. Trump's new tone positioned him as a defender of Ukraine's sovereignty, in contrast to the pragmatist image he had cultivated earlier. The pivot was also dramatic in its implications for US credibility. If Washington's line is that Ukraine can take it all back, then the next logical question is, will the US back that claim with concrete resources? The responses were swift and sharply divided. From Moscow, the Kremlin wasted no time in dismissing Trump's words. Presidential spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Trump's portrayal of Russia as economically strained and militarily vulnerable was simply false. Russian nationalists mocked Trump's comment that Russia was becoming a paper tiger, insisting that Moscow's war effort remains steady and strategic. Ukraine's reaction was more cautious. Officials in Kyiv welcomed the supportive rhetoric, but many reminded their people that Trump has changed his tone before. Ukrainian politicians and analysts emphasized that what truly matters is delivery, weapons, financial aid, and sanctions pressure. One commentator put it bluntly, "We've had words before. We need tanks, not tweets." European leaders were also divided. In Berlin, the German government said Trump's shift should be matched by greater European responsibility, suggesting that Europe cannot simply rely on shifting American politics. France and Poland welcomed the message as a sign of US resolve, but behind closed doors, officials voiced unease about whether Trump's words would hold. In Washington, the White House clarified that Trump's words were partly a negotiating tactic. Officials close to the administration described it as strategic ambiguity, strong rhetoric to pressure Russia without yet committing to a policy overhaul. This pivot raises critical questions for global security. First, if Trump's message is genuine, it suggests a fundamental US commitment to Ukraine's pre-war borders. That would be a major escalation of America's role, potentially requiring deeper military support, harsher sanctions, and longer-term financial aid. Second, it puts pressure on NATO and the EU. Trump's framing that Europe must provide financial support signals that Washington expects Europe to carry the heavier burden. This could create new rifts inside NATO, especially with countries already hesitant about long wars. Third, it dramatically raises the stakes with Russia. By suggesting Ukraine can take back Crimea and Donbass, Trump is directly challenging one of Moscow's red lines. Russia may interpret this as evidence that negotiations are off the table, doubling down militarily. In short, the pivot doesn't just shift rhetoric, it shifts expectations for Kyiv, for Moscow, for NATO, and for the future of the war. What drove the sudden change? Analysts point to several possibilities. Intelligence assessments. US or NATO intelligence may indicate Russia's economy and military are weaker than believed, opening space for a stronger Ukrainian position. Negotiating pressure. Trump may be deliberately raising the stakes, using rhetoric as a bargaining tool to push Moscow toward compromise. Domestic politics. Trump's shift could be aimed at showing strength on the global stage, countering criticism that he is too soft on Putin. Back-channel diplomacy. There is speculation about secret communications, perhaps involving European intermediaries, that pressured Trump into adopting stronger pro-Ukraine language. Testing allies. By calling on Europe to fund Ukraine's fight, Trump may be probing how far NATO partners are willing to go. While no single explanation is confirmed, what's clear is that the shift wasn't random. It reflects a broader calculation about how best to shape negotiations, or at least the perception of them. But with opportunity comes risk. Credibility, risk. Trump has flipped on Ukraine before. If his rhetoric shifts again, America's credibility could be badly damaged. Escalation risk. Pushing the idea of total Ukrainian victory could embolden Kyiv while provoking Moscow, potentially prolonging or intensifying the war. Burden sharing. By demanding Europe carry the financial load, Trump risks straining NATO unity. Some allies may balk at the costs. Domestic divisions. In Washington, Congress remains divided. Any attempt to ramp up support for Ukraine could face opposition from Trump's own political base. For Ukraine, the greatest uncertainty is whether this rhetorical support will translate into tangible backing or whether it will remain political theatre. Looking ahead, there are several key signals to watch. US military aid packages. Does the US announce new weapons shipments or funding increases aligned with Trump's rhetoric? European commitments. Will Germany, France, and Poland increase their contributions in response to Trump's call? Russia's military posture. Does Moscow escalate in response? New offensives, mobilization, or nuclear rhetoric? US domestic politics. How does Congress react? And does Trump's base accept or resist his new line? Negotiation channels. Are there signs of secret diplomacy despite the public hardening of rhetoric? These will determine whether Trump's pivot becomes a genuine policy shift or remains just another headline. From Anchorage to New York, Trump's Ukraine rhetoric has traveled a remarkable distance, from suggesting concessions to urging full territorial recovery. The words alone are historic, but whether they shape reality depends on what follows. In Washington, in Kyiv, and in Moscow, as one Ukrainian analyst put it, encouraging words don't win wars. Weapons, money, and unity do.